Beatrice.
Thank you, myself.
All right, I'm sitting here with John Wells on this front porch at the Field Lab, and we've already taken a tour of the Field Lab. Now, I have some questions.
Okay.
Question number one, let's stick with the Field Lab for a minute. Where are you headed?
Where am I headed?
What's the master plan?
Okay, the master plan is to grow all my own food here and provide all my own water from rainwater catchment and see if it's possible to, live like people had to over 100 years ago. And that's pretty much the master plan. I'm instead of, busting my ass 40 hours a week to buy all the stuff in the grocery store, I'm busting my ass 20 hours a week out here in paradise trying to provide it all for myself.
Well, I want to talk about that 40-hour-a-week plus time and the supermodels and the rock star lifestyle in a minute. But what about sharing the vision with others? Do you have any sort of idea about having a reason for people to come in and more immediately give you money?
At this point, well, actually when I started out here, I didn't think I would have to do that at all because I had a good chunk of change in the bank, and at the time when I came here 3 years ago, the local bank had 6% interest on their checking account. And I figured that I could live off the interest for the rest of my life, and that's since gone down to like below 1%, I believe. So that's sort of not part of the plan anymore. As I started my blog, it was just an extension of a daily diary I'd been writing for the last 15 years. And it wasn't until after about a year that I noticed my traffic got a little heavier that I decided that I was sort of building a brand with the Field Lab, and there might be a way to market that, and that way I can make a little extra money to pay for things. I'm spending a lot of money right now to get all the infrastructure into place, but the plan is to live on about $10,000 a year just to pay my health insurance and a few luxuries and, gas and truck insurance, the occasional traffic ticket.
Well, to come up with that 10 grand, are you considering like maybe a camping area, nature preserve?
I'm looking into the nature preserve aspect just as a tax incentive as far as my property taxes go, although the property taxes are minimal. But camping area, no. Guest house, most likely I'll build a little guest house for people, because I get a lot of visitors who come to see what I've been doing here that have been following the blog for a number of years. And they usually ask me if there's a hotel nearby to stay in, and I don't think you can find one for under $100 a night out here. So if I can provide a little guest house to enhance that visitor experience, they can actually stay out here for a night or two. But I wouldn't want to get to the point where I've got people booked 365 days a year out here, because then it just, I kind of like not having people around. I don't mind it occasionally, but the reason I'm out here is because I can't see another living soul. I like people, I just don't like to look at them all the time. I've been through that living in New York City, and I've kind of had enough of it.
Well, we touched on your blog. We'll get back to that in a second. But let's talk about New York City and supermodels and all that. What's the backstory here? You're coming away from something and to something, and I get the feeling you kind of burned out.
No, I wouldn't say I really burned out. I got tired of all the people. I moved to, I was in college in North Carolina for 5 years, flunked out twice, no degree, and I decided the second time I flunked out, the only course I took in college that I kind of enjoyed was a photography course one semester. So I thought, well, I was 24 at the time, and I thought, the fashion industry seems pretty exciting, so I'll move to New York City and try to become a fashion photographer. And I got into fashion pretty quickly in a... Oh, you want me to turn that off?
What is that?
That's my Aeolian harp. That's that can above you. The wind blows across that string, and then the can amplifies the audio.
That is so cool.
But here, I'll turn that off. So yeah, I moved to New York, when I was 24 and got into the fashion industry. I started off in a catalog studio, which is just basically a fashion factory. We shot the kind of fashion pictures you see in these Sunday flyers, and it was just day in and day out. And but it was an easy job. It paid pretty well, and I did that for 3 years. That was my only full-time job I've ever had. I had benefits and everything, and decided after 3 years of that, when an opportunity came up to go work as an assistant for a photographer in the super fashion world. His name's Bruce Weber. The opportunity came up to work for him for a year, so I quit my job, which was kind of nerve-wracking because I was kind of used to having that steady paycheck, and I was going to be going freelance working for him. And it took me a while to ultimately make the decision to do it, but I got enough flack from my friends saying, what other choice do you have? You can work in this stupid studio the rest of your life, or you can go work for somebody who travels the world. So I did that. I worked for him for a year. The first job with him, I flew to California, and he was working on a film about Chet Baker. It's called a documentary called Let's Get Lost. And so for the first 6 weeks of working for Bruce, we did some fashion shooting, but he was concentrating on shooting this film. So I basically drove people back and forth to the recording studio. Chet Baker was a jazz trumpetist, and to the recording studio and to venues, and then traveling around, photographing him. We stayed in a really nice hotel called the Shangri-La in Santa Monica, in the penthouse suites. And so I pretty much decided right away that I'd made the right decision in moving on to work for this guy. So we were there for a number of weeks, and we spent 10 days in Santa Barbara on the beach. He had a job to do some Calvin Klein Obsession ads. So it was 10 days on the beach in Santa Monica with 12 naked women and 2 naked guys all day long, just Bruce shooting them on the beach, frolicking, whatever. So that was tough. That was a tough aspect to the job. And from there, for the year I worked for Bruce, I was at my apartment in New York for maybe 3 weeks. I traveled the rest of the time. We were in Paris. We went to the Cannes Film Festival. We were in London. In fact, I was just on my chatting with people on my webcam last night about a hotel I stayed in outside of London called the Cliveden. And it's a super castle with 640 manicured garden acres on it. And I was kind of bragging about those days, showing people pictures of that, and I sort of remembered it, but seeing the pictures again from their website of this castle, it's like I kind of remembered being there, but it's like living here now, I can't imagine having ever been there. So I did the year with Bruce in the high fashion world, and I kind of decided near the end of that tour of duty that the high fashion world was kind of didn't really make much sense to me. I don't care what the new color in spring's going to be. I don't think it's very important. And there's other things that, to me, seemed more important in life. So I moved on from there and worked for just a strict commercial photographer, not really high fashion stuff, for about a year full-time in his studio. And then I went freelance. So that was sort of my second full-time job, because I was on staff and I had benefits for a year, but then I quit and worked freelance after that. And near the end of that job with this guy, Chris Callis is his name, I started building these sculptural televisions. I'd take apart a TV and put it back together, so it still functioned as a television, but it didn't really look like a television anymore. I'd extract the picture tubes and extend the wires and do these funky things. And I had brought some monitors. I had 10 of them that I'd built in my apartment. Meanwhile, I'm working as a photo assistant the whole time, and I was working on these on the evenings and weekends. And I took some to a friend's studio to photograph them. And when we were going into his studio, there was a furniture store on the ground floor. This was on Lafayette Street in down Lower Manhattan. And the guy saw us bringing them in. He said, "Oh, those look really cool. I want to put some in my window as a display." And I said, "Okay, sure." So we put some in there, and somebody from the New York Times saw them and did a little blurb about me in the Times. Actually, 20 years almost to the day that I had my recent article in the New York Times in the same section of the newspaper. And from that little blurb in the newspaper, I started getting calls from stylists wanting to rent these for photo shoots and for music videos and TV commercials. And that started pretty much by accident a prop and set building business that I did for 9 years in New York. I ended up having to move out of my apartment in Manhattan because I needed more space. I moved to Brooklyn and ran the business there. It was called John Wells Televisions. And I just built funky, weird TVs and rented them out for various things. And I was able to make quite a bit of money doing that, especially after I got a commission with Discovery Channel to build monitors for some of their stores, because they had a guy, I think his name was Greg Meyer, who ran the store aspect of Discovery, and he just loved my work, and he wanted to put it in all their stores. So I made a buttload of money doing that for a couple of years. And then he left Discovery Channel, and a new person came in to take over his position, and she absolutely hated me. So that was the end of that gravy train. But I had saved up enough money at that point where I was thinking about moving further away from the city, and I found an area in upstate New York that through one of my aunts who had done genealogy on our family, discovered on my grandfather's side of the family a bunch of his his predecessors lived in this town, in Spencertown, New York, about 2.5 hours north of New York City. So I went up there and looked around the area, and it just so happened that a big farmhouse with 32 acres was about to go on the market, and it was built by the brother of my great-great-grandfather. So I contacted the family, and they were actually quite happy to hear from me because they thought they were just going to have to put it on the open market. It had been in the family, since it was built in 1845, and they were kind of, weren't too happy about just selling it off, but the fact that I was a distant relative, they really liked that idea. So we worked out the deal. I bought the house and I moved to upstate New York, and I continued to do a couple little prop and set building things from there, but it was just the logistics didn't work very well, and there was a thriving building industry up there, house building. And carpenters in the area were making $50 to $75 an hour, so I got into just general contracting and did that. I built 2 full houses from the ground up with a crew of guys, and then I did a bunch of renovation jobs on my own. It was all freelance up there. And after 7 years of that, my mortgage and taxes, I'm still surprised I got a mortgage on that house, because based on my income and all that, I was paying 8.25% interest for a loan on a $250,000 house, and that was not a very good interest rate. And at the time, I thought it would be okay, but my property taxes doubled in the 7 years I was there. They went from $6,000 a year to $12,000 a year just for the property taxes. So after 7 years, I was getting to the point where, I don't think I'm going to be able to keep paying for this house. And I kind of thought when I moved up there that maybe I'd get married and start a family, because I had this old family house. It was 2,800 square feet, 32 acres of woods on it. And it was sort of at a point when my father had died that it kind of made me think about what I was doing, and I thought, I just can't afford this house. I can't afford it. I'm going to have to sell it. And the market was just starting to go south on the housing market. And I probably would have become a foreclosure statistic had I not got out when I did. But I was able to, I'd come down to Terlingua to visit the area once, just before I moved here. And my first thought was that no one in their right mind would want to live out here. And I got back to New York, and I decided, it is cheap to go there. And I did the math on if I sold the house for X amount of money, I could walk away with XX amount of money. And I decided, I should just do this. So I contacted a realtor who was a friend of mine, and I had a full price offer in 2 weeks from a local family. I told the realtor, I really don't want to sell this house to a couple of guys from New York City who want a weekend place in the country that have millions of dollars. And they said, well, that's really the only people that are buying up here because the land is so expensive. The land alone was $35,000 an acre in this town where I lived. So luckily I got a full price offer from a local family that always wanted the house. In fact, I should have done for sale by owner first, because these people just popped up just waiting for the day. And so I ended up having to give $17,000 to the realtor who did absolutely nothing. In fact, when we did the closing and they were passing the checks around and they wrote his check out, I said, now do you think you really earned that check? And he just smiled and nodded. It's kind of insurance, basically. But so I sold the place. I stayed on the property for about 8 months. I had a camp set up in the woods that I started experimenting with alternative energy out there. In fact, I rented my house out the last 2 summers to try to help with the bills to New York City people, weekenders, and lived in this little trailer out in the woods with solar panels and a solar hot water heater, and that was it. And I really enjoyed that and decided, I think I could do that. So I stayed in my little trailer until I got all my belongings either thrown away, burned, or packed up for what I wanted to keep. And then I hit the road in October of '07. Came out here. I had arranged through a private individual to look at some land he had for sale. And it was a Friday afternoon that I went around with him. Saturday morning I wrote him a check for my 40 acres. And then I went to Phoenix and spent like a family just trying to figure out how I was going to get started out here. And I came back December 7th of '07 and started building. And I finished the basic box of this house in 9 days and moved in. And then it took 3 months, I think, after that to do all the finish work on it. And then I started on my wind turbine farm and got that going. And then I started on the greenhouse about a year later. So the greenhouse, like I said, has been going on for 2 years now. I'm trying to get that done. So that's it in a long nutshell.
So from naked chicks to artistic television sets to carpentry to living in the woods in a trailer to discovering Terralingua. And I've noticed just in the, I've been out here off and on for about 4 years, that a lot of people come here and only a certain percentage of them dig it,
Yeah.
want to stay here.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are drawn to this area because of the low prices, which was my initial draw too. But I came here with the realization that, I know it's cheap to buy here, but I know you also have to drive 60 miles to a good grocery store. And I thought, it's cheap enough to try it out. If it really sucks, I can get out of here. A lot of people think, oh, this is going to be my dream, and they get out here and they get so disappointed by it and they just abandon it and take off. But luckily, I have a skill set that involves all sorts of different aspects of building and electronics and things that made everything relatively easy for me. Being a pioneer in the 21st century is a lot easier than it was, 150 years ago. I've got it. Within days, I had electricity, from the sun and from the wind, and had hot water from the sun, Hopefully I can sit here and say, and I grow all my own food here, and don't have to go to the store if I don't want to. So. And if I really need something desperately, UPS and FedEx come right to my door, so I can order stuff. In fact, I ordered 2 frozen pizzas from Lou Malnati's Deep Dish Pizza in Chicago, and they came second day air frozen. And they were expensive, but it was kind of an interesting thing. You can get anything delivered to you out here. So. It's not like you really have to go anywhere unless you really want to.
Well, I'm still curious, though. I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
I mean, we went from naked models
Right.
and castles and rock star lifestyle to what is, at a certain level, monastic existence. I mean, what's the square footage on this place?
128 square feet.
128 square feet as opposed to
2,800 square feet.
Yeah. Do you ever miss it?
No. You know, it was when I was doing my little trailer thing in the woods or in those summers that something just clicked, and it's like, you know, this is such a simple lifestyle, and I had this 2,800 square foot, which I was, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 3 big living rooms, a huge kitchen, and I used about as much space in that house for personal space as I use here. And I really got to the point where I couldn't enjoy it anymore. The house, it was a big, beautiful house and all that, and but it's just like, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm perfectly happy with this amount of space.